Good evening. How's everybody doing tonight? Everybody good? Everybody good? Come on, let's make some noise this evening. Y'all good? Glad to be here. We are here tonight, and we are here to discuss two things, democracy and liberation. We are here at the John Lewis Social Justice Academy. Can we make some noise for the legacy and the memory of John Lewis, our elder? The one that taught us how to get in good trouble. There is no, Dr. Martin Luther King said it this way, that when the documents of this nation were written, that they were essentially a check or a promissory note that were given to all people. But when it came time for our people to get rights, the check came back insufficient funds. That is to say that it is as if the rights that are supposed to exist for our folks did not exist in actuality. Become very important because these types of gatherings help our nation as much as possible to not go to collections. We are here to participate in the act of liberation, and the reality is liberation is a group project. It requires all of us working together toward the common goal of the flourishing of all of our folks, because the reality is that until all of us are free, none of us are free. And so we're here to have some discussions this evening. My name, by the way, sorry, that was rude of me because I did all this talking and y'all didn't even know who I am. I'm a stranger man. My name is Reverend Chris Buckner. I serve as the Associate Pastor of Justice at the Antioch Fellowship Church. And I am here to talk for a little bit of time and get out of the way so that we can begin this evening with a very enlightening panel that will be moderated by Miss Camille McCollum. She's on her way out now, and so I'm here to introduce her, and she's going to introduce our panelists. Let's make some noise for them as we begin this evening.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Camille McCallum. I'll be moderating today's panel. I am the founder of Black Women on a Mission. We are an organization committed to celebrating the resilience of Black women. Part of that initiative is called the 92% Club. So this is a club that we started right after the 2024 election because we ran hard for that election to not end up in the position that we are currently in today. And as a part of that, afterwards, a lot of people weren't feeling very resilient. A lot of people were feeling a little beat up and a little beat down by the situation that our country was in. But we know as Black women, we may be down, but we are never out of the fight. And so we developed the 92% Club as a place for women to come, for them to gather, and for us to get organized. And that organization is part of what keeps us going and what allows us to build our power. So tonight we're talking about democracy and liberation. We know that in this country, what they are trying to currently do with Project 2025 is roll back a lot of the progress and the efforts that we have made. So while we still have a bit of a mountain to climb, they're still trying to push us down the hill. But we know that we're not going without a fight. And so this conversation tonight part of that. It's a part of how we stay organized, how we stay together, and how we build our power. So our panel tonight is made up of people who are doing that work every single day. I'm going to bring them out and let them introduce themselves. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome our esteemed panel. Clap it up, clap it up, clap it up.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Starting right here with Mr. Lewis, if you would go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lewis Bedford. I'm a voting rights attorney currently based out of D.C., but my home is Dallas. That's where a lot of work needs to get done. That's where a lot of work is getting done, and I'm very happy to be a part of this wonderful panel with some amazing people.
Good evening. My name is Tiara Cooper. I am a community organizer, born, raised, and based in Dallas, Texas. I am grateful to be in this space with you all on this evening. Happy Black History Month, and all power to the people.
Good evening. My name is Cardall Coleman. I'm an organizer and a political party leader. And I'm grateful to be at the historic John Lewis Social Justice Academy. So grateful to be a part of this conversation in this panel.
Absolutely. So all of you work really at the intersection of democracy and liberation. So can you talk a little bit about what those two things mean to you and how they intersect?
Well, first and foremost, democracy and liberation, they work hand in hand. And I think oftentimes whenever people think about democracy, they like to say that that was something that is a core tenet of the foundation of this country. But the reality is it wasn't. Oftentimes whenever people think about this history, we were not included. Our founding fathers were white property-owning men. So none of us on this stage and none of the people in the audience would have been included in that. And so that is something that we need to realize as we move forward, is that we have to work together, in tandem, hand in hand, but we also have to realize that these systems were not built for us. So whenever we're talking about liberation, we're talking about liberation from the very systems that this country was founded on. So that's something I like to think about, and I also like to focus my work on trying to figure out the best ways for our people to be able to not only survive in it, but to thrive in it, and that's how I like to be able to center my work and center how I like to see how we all interact with our systems around us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, liberation forces and requires us to dream. It requires us to freedom dream. It requires us to dream of systems in a way that we have never seen them before. It requires so much more of us. It demands a higher expectation of our people to create alternatives, to create interventions to a lot of the systems that we asserted ourselves into, that we fought for ourselves to be a part of. Democracy, we were not a part of this. We had to fight our way into it. And even yet and still, there isn't equal rights. There aren't a lot of ways of which we are equal to our counterparts. And so liberation, to me, means looking beyond those points is fighting today. Fighting today and get your hand in the mud today, and fighting for these systems that might not even be on the ballot initiative. Or we see a lot of our counterparts community in spaces where they've won on ballot initiatives. They've won in the democracy game. And yet we are still not free. And yet they still have Cop City. And yet they still have Cop Nation. And yet they're still building detention facilities across this country. And so a lot of those things that we want to materialize, they demand a higher perspective. I'll leave it at that for now.
I think democracy and liberation, it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition, specifically as Black people, and more specifically as a Black person who is involved in political process, right? Some days you wake up and think that you have to choose, right? What's the louder voice, saving democracy or looking at the current state of liberating your people, and how do you do that, right? And so I think this is a great conversation of how do we really look at the two, can both be saved? Is it our role to try to save one or the other, specifically as Black people in the movement?
Absolutely. You guys bring up some good points. We're heading into a midterm election. Black people are only about 60 years into the right to vote, period. And so many things that are on the ballot, as you said, are not even addressing some of the issues that affect our community. And yet, voter suppression is still at an all-time high. So as we think about going into these midterm elections, what are the ways that you guys are talking to the people that you touch about voting and about the importance of voting and how that plays a role in our own liberation?
Well, when it comes to voting and just participating in our democracy, you have to ask people, what is something important to you? I think oftentimes we like to come in and just like to tell people the things that matter. But in order to actually get somebody to realize how important voting is, you have to connect with them on a personal level. Whenever you go to college campuses, talk to them about how voting and the people that you elect very much has an impact on social media. Whenever you talk about voting, talk about how that impacts gas prices, grocery prices, it impacts what books are even in our schools. Politics impacts every single thing that we do. And in fact, it even impacts what newspapers are even able to write. If you look at the Washington Post, politics is a very real reason why the Washington Post is no longer the way that it is. That is something that means so much to everybody, and we have to realize that in order for people to truly understand, truly commit, truly realize how important voting is, we have to humanize it. And I think in order for us to be able to humanize it, we also have to humanize ourselves. We can't come in as though we're experts, come in as though we know everything. We have to realize that I don't know what this person is going through. I don't know if the healthcare system is impacting them in such a negative way. In order for us to get people to truly come out to vote and truly realize how important all this is, we have to make that connection that truly makes them realize that I can't separate myself from this, unlike, unfortunately, what we're seeing with so many people today.
Absolutely.
I couldn't agree more. Myself, I'm formerly incarcerated. I think it's best that I start there because for a long time I could not vote. I was ineligible to vote. I was wrongfully incarcerated, and then at one point in my life I was rightfully incarcerated. But I named that because when I got into this work, I would oftentimes tell folks at the doors, vote for people like me because I cannot vote. I can pay taxes and I can do everything else in this world, but I could not vote. And with that, I felt as if I had lost a sense of dignity, that I was not a citizen, that I was an other person, right? And when I began doing this work, it all was electoral for me. It was the only framework that I knew and I understood. And Lewis was just naming it, meeting folks on an individual level at the doors, or whether it was phone calls, you would hear their stories, and it would oftentimes connect to resources, lack thereof. It would connect to so many things, but you would hear the consistency. And in that, I knew that every time you have the opportunity to vote, you should. And not only that, I'm also very honest that everything that we desire, especially when I talk about liberation, cannot be materialized by way of a vote. And I think it's necessary that we be honest with our people. So I oftentimes say vote and. Vote and show up to the town halls. Vote and hold whoever you get elected accountable. Vote and show up to the protest. Vote and. I think it is dishonest to go out into communities that oftentimes, let's be real, some of these elected officials are strangers to the hood. And we see them only when it's time to get out and go vote. And you know, it all starts with trust and presence. So build a presence, build trust, and maybe then you can get my vote. Care about me, care about my children, and perhaps I might vote for you. But to shame folks into voting, because I oftentimes would see that too when I first got into this work, was like, yeah, black people not voting. Black people got real reasons for not voting. Time poverty is real. Real poverty is real. Their issues that are at their door are real. Voting is in the backyard, not in the front door for a lot of people. ICE is at the front door for a lot of people. Police is at the front door for a lot of people. The food stamp card getting cut off is at the front door of a lot of people. So how do we reconcile with that? I don't believe voting is a cure-all, but it is necessary because our ancestors fought and bled for it, had dogs sicked on them for it. There is a reason why Texas is being attacked over voting. There is a reason why they're trying to mute us. There is a reason why they're trying to suppress us. There's a reason why they're handing out felony convictions. Because the less, more black and brown people are incarcerated than any other people group. And if I can give you a felony, that's a way to automatically disqualify a group in a population of people. That's right. So vote, but vote and.
That's good. It is a vote and Dr. King talking about democracy, right? And the ability to vote and how we talk to people about voting and it all being consequential. Dr. King said, just give us the ballot box. So it is a vote and, but we do need that critical piece. And what that looks like is going back to what they did in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, right? Where everybody was an organizer. Right? We were all concentrated in particular areas, and we all faced the similar type of pressure, right? At the similar type of schools, we were more centralized as a community. And so I think we have to become organizers, each of us, right? No one has arrived yet. And I think we've kind of lost our way by thinking that some of us have arrived. And so if we all get back to becoming organizers, what does that mean? That means connecting the dots. So Tiara raises a great point. Lewis raises a great point, but we have to connect those issues and the vote right? And so when we educate people, there are some elected officials who are doing great work. Whether they're down at the state legislature or city hall or in Washington, D.C., but then we all have to do our part and educate each other on what's happening there and how do we disseminate that information to let people know here's the great things that are being done, but also these are the things that we need to mobilize against, right? And so as she's talking about things being taken away from us and stripped away from us for a large part of our community, we don't know until it's right at our front door. We don't know until it's getting cut off. Right? But there are some folks who can see these things coming down the pipeline, and we have to continue to organize and mobilize and talk about those things as they're coming.
If you don't mind, I think to Cardall's point, something that is incredibly important for people to be able to realize is that the history of Black people and liberation did not start with the Civil War. Right. It did not start with the Emancipation Proclamation. People who look like us have been fighting for our liberation ever since this country was started. For example, back in 1780, there was a slave. I forgot her name, but I believe it was Annette Freeman. She ended up filing a suit in the state of Massachusetts in order to be able to get her own freedom. And the state of Massachusetts Supreme Court believed then that she was able to be free. And oftentimes, whenever we look at our own history, we don't talk about how education is a very important part of this and how a lot of our people aren't educated, intentionally so. Whether it's taking books out of the libraries or even looking at what happens with redistricting. In redistricting, we had the Texas State Legislature, not just what happened recently, but back in 2021, say that even though 95% of Texas population growth came from people of color, 95% of people's population growth came from people of color from 2010 to 2020. The redistricted districts did not reflect that. Even though the state of Texas has the largest Black population in the country, our districts didn't reflect that. And I think we need to realize that this is all an intentional effort in order to make sure that Black and brown people are not able to elect the candidate of their choice because they realize if we did, it would not be the current people who are in power.
Right. A lot of what you guys are bringing up really does go back to those systems, right? And they create these systems that don't work for us or that try to strip us of our power. So as we're talking about building power, what are the ways that we can do that outside of the ballot box? What are those tactical ways that people can organize? Because 99% of people are never going to be elected officials. That's just the way that it's set up. But we all have a role to play in our own liberation and our own organization, because as you've mentioned, we are fragmented. Sometimes in our communities, as Cardall mentioned, when sometimes people start thinking they've moved on up in the world, you find that your neighborhood begins to look less and less like you. It's harder and harder to find people that look like you and to do some of that organizing. So what are those tactical ways that people can get involved with their community and start building that power?
I'm going to turn it over to our resident organizer, but first and foremost, I would say, to Cardall's point, we are all organizers. We're all involved in this struggle. We are all involved in this effort, and it's incumbent upon each and every one of us to be able to realize that we can't just separate ourselves and say, hey, I don't need to worry about politics, or hey, that doesn't really matter to me, because it does. Whether or not you're formally incarcerated, whether or not you're an educated student, whether or not you are somebody with a PhD, politics impacts every single part of your life. And so we have to realize that in order for any of these systems to change, something has to change. Things can't change unless something changes, and that means we have to change who we are, how we see ourselves, that we can't just believe that we're the talented 10th just because I have a degree. Because the reality is these systems are going to treat us all the same.
That's right.
And we have to realize that in order for anything to change, something actually has to change. So over to our resident organizer over here, Ms. Cooper.
I'll just start by saying, one, the system is functioning as it was designed
100%.
to operate. It's functioning by design. And with that being said and named, I think just the context around voting and voting rights, voting rights were a part of a strategy, a liberation strategy, a freedom strategy, but we made voting the goal, like almost as if it was just like the end point, but it was a part of a larger plan, and I think we've lost the plot. So with the losing of the plot, we have to create a new plot or go back to the basics. And with that is pick an issue, any issue, because there is no shortage of work. There is no shortage when it comes to liberation. Pick an issue, any issue, bring your gifts, bring your talents, bring your tools, bring your time, pick an issue, research it, find other folks that might be beefed up with that same system or that same issue that you got beef with, right? And handle it. What does it look like to handle it? Like I said, it starts with research. It starts with knowing what you're talking about, talking to people that know things around that certain issue, right? Pinpointing that thing. And then deciding what action even looks like. What are some strategies and tactics, and building that thing all the way up. It does require strategy. I don't want to get away from that, because oftentimes you get a lot of folks who get riled up about a thing and just want to move on it. And it's like, yeah, I like that you got that fire in you. I love that you got that energy, but it needs to be harnessed. It needs to be watered. There needs to be education. There needs to be grounding. There needs to be political education. Like, we come from a lineage, right? You know, we come from a people who've done this before. Like, there's nothing new under the sun. And so it's necessary that we ground that energy, that we root that in something deeper, so that our folks know that they're a part of something that's bigger than them, and that if we've won before, we can win again. I am also grounded in the words of Sada Shakur. It is our duty to fight for freedom. It is our duty to win. And I think we get away from to win. It is our duty to win, to love each other and support each other. And we have nothing to lose but our chains. I'm deeply rooted in that. I'm grounded in that. And when, you know, folks come to me with issues, I want them to equally be grounded in something deeper than the moment. Because if you just grounded in the moment, child, you're gonna come and go. And we know, especially in Texas, you're going to be tried. You're going to be tried. You're going to be tested. But the fight lives on. And so I'm about creating sustainability. What does it look like to be sustainable in this movement, not simply in this moment as it relates to organizing?
Absolutely.
But there's no shortage.
That's something I appreciate about Ms. Cooper here and Mr. Coleman, is that they also take the education piece incredibly important to them, and they try to make sure that they aren't a silo. They try to make sure that they're able to educate and empower people who might not know that they can be empowered in order to try to change the system, because they also realize that they can't do it themselves. And that's something I am just incredibly privileged to know these two people, but that is something that I incredibly admire about them, is the fact that they do their best in order to be able to empower the people around them, to make sure that they know that they can make a change too.
Absolutely.
Likewise. I think that's a really good important part. It is our duty to win, but then also we've got to take another step further and identify the win. What is the win, right? Because every battle looks different. As we were going through redistricting Senator West, we had to really name the win. What is a win in this situation? How do we educate our community, right? So identifying the win, naming the win, but also we have to stay in connection and stay in community. One of the most beautiful things, I guess, that comes out of the winter storm or the pandemic, where we all feel a little isolated and we're home, people find community very quickly, right? The online community, remember during the pandemic when we were buying up everything black. Like if it was black owned, like the sales were skyrocketing because we were able to connect in a different way online. Maybe life slowed down for us, and so we were able to focus in a little bit more. But I think outside of the ballot box, you have to identify your win, right? Know that it's important to win, but then also identify what that win is, and then stay connectional in community. I think that, different generations do it differently, right? Millennials have a good way of being connectional online. Gen Z, always online. But for folks who are Xers and Boomers, they can organize very quickly in a different way, right? So understanding your community, how to tap into that, but then also understanding what the win is. And I think that's how we kind of keep the wheels going.
Absolutely. If you guys could describe for us right now, because obviously we're in a pretty contentious political climate at this time, what wins you're going after right now? I will start and let you know that the win that I'm kind of seeking right now is really around this current midterm election that's going on right now. I have a large online platform, and so one of the things that I can do is get disengaged voters at least aware that there's an election going on right now and you can go out to vote. One of the things I hear all the time is that Texas is not a red state, it's a non-voting state, meaning that the majority of Democrats in our state are simply just not going out to vote. And maybe that's because they lack hope or they lack resources or whatever the case may be, but at least I can try to build awareness. So I'm interested to know what wins you guys are going after right now.
I think that's a great question. And for me, a win is making sure that people understand what our elected officials do. Not everybody knows what a county commissioner does. Not everybody knows what a state senator or a state representative does. Even something down to the local level of a county treasurer. I think it is very important for people to be able to understand what our elected officials do, because if you're able to do that, once again, you can understand how that person impacts your life. So that is a win for me, is actively working to make sure that people understand not only when an election is, but who is on the ballot and what elections can actually do and how they can impact your life.
I love that.
That is huge. I'm always asking Cardall, what does this mean? What do they do? And beyond what do they do, what is the power of the role? I think power matters to people more than role description.
Yes.
And so I'm always like, what's the power in this position? And he's like, let me think about it. But with that, some of the wins I'm sorry, was it wins?
Yes.
Wins. It's one, just continuously informing and educating the formerly incarcerated population of people who may be, don't know if they can vote or not, because oftentimes there's this like myth that there's a lifetime ban on voting. And so the education for that particular group is very critical to me, because that is a whole base of folks whose doors typically do not get knocked, because a lot of these institutions, they use systems that only knock on likely voters' doors. And we wouldn't be in there because we've been somewhere else for a very long time. And so I am very committed to getting those folks out. I'm also just committed to a lot of different criminal justice issues, one being the death penalty and abolishing the death penalty, let me say it that way, here in the state of Texas and beyond. And so there's several folks on the roll that I'm looking to liberate. And I want them to live to see their days. What else I'm looking forward to a lot of things. Don't ask me that. I want to win.
It's never a bad thing to be hopeful.
I want to win, okay?
It's never a bad thing to be hopeful.
You know, seeing Black people resist. I think authoritarianism, it wants us and it desires for us to be comfortable with being ran over. It requires us to be silent about our pain and our struggle. It requires for journalists to be kidnapped, and for little kids who, might not be citizens to be kidnapped, and we don't say nothing about it, don't feel no ways about it, it's just normalized. And so one of the greatest victories we could have, even if it's not the ultimate win, would be just resisting as a people. Yes. People rising up, the uprising. And it's already happening. We see Minneapolis, we see even right here in our city. But to continue to see that, because it's been years, you'll see these fly-by-day moments like 2020, and then it'll get real quiet, or it's just a few of us out here in these streets. But I love when we see the momentum build up, and I love when new organizers are created.
Absolutely.
I think the resistance is definitely a win. We saw it in 2020. We saw it in 2016, immediately after that election. And so seeing people flood the streets, whether they look like us or not, I think that's important, right? Because immediately after this last election, we heard, I'm tired, we did our part, y'all got it, right? That's on you. But to see every different group, nationality, people group, really organize and start to mobilize, whether you're a part of the queer community, whether you're a part of the immigrant population, Black and brown folks being in the streets together, this year has shown us how important it is for all of us to really get behind a couple of issues and build a coalition, right? Senator West talks about building coalitions around interest. And so I think that this year has taught us that more than ever. This past 2 years have taught us that more than ever. And so I'm looking forward to educating people about the process. Look, we're on the eve of early vote here where in Dallas County, voting looks very different, specifically on election day. People have to have been set back by having to vote at their precinct level. And so that's something that we've not faced in probably over 5-6 years. We've had access countywide. And so that's a step back in the wrong direction. And so educating people on that process, but then also educating people about who's on the ballot. Candidate selection really matters. Right? Folks may say, well, I don't know who's on the ballot, or I don't see anybody who looks like me or speaking my language. This time, in this primary election in Texas, you have some folks who are really talking that talk, specifically on the Democratic side. And so I think there's a lot of choices to be made. And so the more that we educate people about what their choices are, I think I get excited about that because, a few years ago, we couldn't participate in a primary election. Black folks couldn't, right? And so now you have Black people up and down the ballot. And so I think that's exciting to see the power and the roles and the fact that we can hold these positions and that knowing that we can win these positions as well. So there's been a lot of talk, controversy to the folks who are watching online saying that, you're not electable and that, just in general, right? I think there's been some racial overtones in this primary election in general. And so when we talk about electability and can we win and people having choice and agency, all of that is going to be coming to bear in this primary election. I look forward to that.
Absolutely. So 2 things on that. One is that I love how different everybody's answers are because it just goes to show that we all can have a different ministry and we all trying to build the same congregation here.
Amen.
And so I love that because I think it also just goes to show how we can empower our people to get involved in the ministry that's right for them.
Right.
Because as you said, whether it's issue specific, whether it's around your people group, whether you've been through a very specific situation like being incarcerated or anything else, you have a group to mobilize. There are people who care about the same issues that you care about. We are all so much more alike than we are different. Therefore, you're not having an original experience. There are other people who will join with you and build a coalition. And the second thing around electability that I love to speak to, so one of my big things is I don't believe in no limiting beliefs at all, And so I think when we get to talking about who's electable and who's not electable, that all becomes propaganda because if I'm on the ballot, certainly I can be elected, But I think that there's so much done to try and limit our mindsets about what can happen, which speaks to the point that was made around they want us to shrink. They want us to get really, really small and think this is the way that it has to be because this is the way that it's always been, when that is so not the case. So as people who are in these different positions, you have influence over different groups. I want to know, how do you help people who may not have the loudest voice or be the most extroverted or hold the position? How do you empower those people to go and find their thing and get to work?
You got to be a connector. You got to be somebody who, even if you don't have the answer, just try to be able to connect them to somebody who might. Oftentimes I find myself in situations where somebody will come to me and say, Lewis, I have this problem. I don't know what to be able to do. Can you help me? And oftentimes I might not be able to help that person. But what I can do is I can connect them to somebody who might. And so I think that would be my answer, is just trying to make sure that I'm doing what I can to connect somebody to somebody else. And hopefully that person will do the same and ultimately be able to build a community where if I'm not able to do something, somebody else is, and we can once again realize that we don't have to do any of this by ourselves.
Yes.
I like this question because I think people tend to confuse organizing with activism. Okay. Activism is loud. Organizing is not. Oftentimes, organizing is happening behind the scenes. It's happening in your face and you don't know it. It's just happening, right? And so there is a role for everybody. I think folks get accustomed to Martin Luther King and so many of the civil rights leaders, but you don't know a whole lot of them. Ella Baker, one of the greatest architects of the movement.
Yes.
but she wasn't as well known. But she orchestrated this her thing. So it's important to know these types of organizers, these types of activists, these types, because if you had that education, you would know there is very well a place for you. You would know that I might be loud today, but I wasn't always. I was introverted. I grew up very shy, but now not so much, because it hurt long enough, you say ouch, and you get a little loud. And so also that is a trajectory for a lot of folks. You might be quiet today, but it hurt long enough, you might just scream. You might just be enraged. You might just pick up a microphone, and you might just take up your position. So for some folks, they do need to be pushed to the front, and I'm there to put their battery in their back every time. And for some, it's like, this is not in your self-interest. But there is a role for you in this movement, because you ought to have a hand in your liberation.
Yes.
You ought to, it's not nobody else's responsibility to do that for you. You have to have a hand in it too. So I'm also big on I can't do this without you. Well, you got to do something.
Yeah.
Period.
And I mean, we're in a school named after an organizer.
Hey.
I think that's also something to be able to point out. Like John Lewis, before he ended up going to Congress, he was an activist.
Right.
And he was an organizer too. And I just think that we cannot separate those two. They are very different, but they are also so incredibly linked that we have to realize that some of us might also need to be activists. Some of us might also need to be organizers, but we all got to do a little bit of both.
Period.
Absolutely.
There's definitely a space in the movement for everybody and a role in the movement for everybody. Not everybody's going to be the activist type. Not everybody's going to be the organizer type. We get people who walk into our office every day and say, I don't want to make phone calls. That makes me a little bit nervous, but I can write letters. Right? I can write a letter to my neighbor. I'd like to tell a story of a young man that I met who moved from Mississippi not too long ago, a couple of years ago, and just saw something very bright in this person. And he wasn't really the activist type or the organizer type, very deep thinker, but he had a skill that we don't often think of as far as organizing and activism, was with camera. That person is Jeremy Hines, and I watched him really develop his skill and become the vision of the movement over the last 2 years. Chronicling everything that we've done from protests to rallies to testifying in the Capitol. When people have different skills, whether that's decorations or whatever it is, there's space in the movement for everybody. And it doesn't have to be out front all the time. I think there's room for all of us to really lean in and add our gifts to what's going on. So it doesn't always look like whether you're a financier, whether you are really good at raising money, whether you're good at, several different things, whether you're cooking. Listen, the movement has to be fueled. Right? There's some people, that we have folks who do baked goods, right? And so there's so many ways that people can add their gifts. Last election cycle, Lewis, there were folks who were just so nervous about the outcome of the election that they were baking every day. We have to tell them, don't bring any more baked goods to the office. But that was just their skill and what they brought to the movement. And so we had plenty of cakes and pies and everything we needed at the HQ. But there's space for whatever your talent is to bring it to the movement.
Absolutely.
Can I just add one additional thing? Is that it doesn't have to be this grandiose thing either. Like, a lot of folks are already connected to people in places that they already are.
Yeah.
So if you connect to your church, if you are, part of a sorority, a group of any sort, start with the places that you already are planted. If you is online, I don't know what you call them, streamers, stream for the movement, Get in there however you got to get in there. It doesn't have to look a particular way. And I would recommend always start at your kitchen table. You got neighbors? Start small.
Yeah.
Don't think of you need to talk to the world today. I wouldn't recommend that. And I also just want to caution that, I think someone started with connection. We still have to, it has to come back to people. Because we're also seeing this generation of people who think they're organizers, but they're not connected to any people. They're just speaking on things, and they cannot translate online to offline action. And so I really want to name these things that I'm also seeing, these trends. right, within the movement, that I want to caution also, that you still need to have connections and relationships with people. You still got to have one-to-ones with people, real people, not AI, chat, GBT, and whomever else in between. This is still about people.
Right.
So I know we was going a lot of places like anything can, but people.
Yeah.
People, right? So I wanted to flag that. I'm sorry.
I
She
mean,
said
people are good at tech. I've seen some AI ads and things that really added to the mix, gave us good laughs, but also really help move the movement along, right? And so even including technology, so people who have those gifts, I think that's been helpful too.
I think one of the things that I'd really like to get from each of you is what your entry point into doing this work really was. Because I think when we speak on it sometimes, it can sound like kind of theoretical. It's like, you can do anything, bake your pies. And it's like, okay, but I still I'm not really sure what to do with that. And so for me, my entry point into politics was in college. I was looking for a major, and my parents were very concerned with me being poor. They were like, please don't go up there and pick something where you're gonna be broke and living with us, please. And so I was kind of searching around, and I tried all the routes. I was gonna be a lawyer like you. I was gonna be an esteemed attorney. But I had this kid's voice in the back of my mind. He was like, all my parents do is read and write all day. You don't wanna be no lawyer. That's not fun. And I just kept hearing that in the back of my mind, and I was like, I don't wanna do that. I'm not gonna be no lawyer. But I found policy. There was a policy major at my school, and there were these two little dudes who carried briefcases to class, and they were policy majors, and I was like, they're going somewhere in life, and I'm gonna be like them. And so that's how I literally became a policy major, and I enjoyed the work so much, and I just soaked it up like a sponge. And I'm from Mississippi, so that comes with its own set of issues. But next thing I knew, there were all these kids on my campus trying to get the state flag taken down, because our state flag still looked like the Confederate flag. And so me, being me, I had a little column in the newspaper, and I was like, well, I'm gonna write me a little column in the newspaper about it, because I was not the activist type. I was like, it's a little dangerous out here, guys. I'm not too into that with the danger. And so I wrote my little column, and I put it out, and I didn't think much of it, because I'm not thinking too many people read the school newspaper. Anyway, a lot of people read that particular article. And so next thing I know, I was being asked to speak at a rally to take down the state flag. And I knew that rally was going to be attended by white nationalists. I knew it was going to be attended by the KKK. And my mother asked me not to do it. She was like, they got some old kids up there that can talk. You definitely don't have to be the one to talk. But I thought to myself, like, this is a defining moment for me, where I either have to say, I'm going to be fearful and I'm going to let these people make a coward out of me, or I'm going to get up here and say what I have to say. And so I gave my speech, and I was scared, and I was kind of shaking in my boots and crying a little bit afterwards. But ultimately, that was my first experience of owning my story and my power. And once I got a taste of that, and that flag came down 2 weeks later, and I saw that this actually made a difference, I couldn't go back to the old way of being like, I'll just write my little column and go on about my business. I had to be all the way in it. And from there, the bricks start laying themselves, and you get pretty far down the road, and now I'm on stage with you guys. And so I want to know what you guys' entry points were, because I think sometimes they come out of nowhere, or sometimes you're not expecting them. But I want people to know that there are so many different paths to get into this work.
Well, for me, I've been very blessed and fortunate. My grandfather was the first black judge in Dallas County, so I've been able to walk in some amazing footsteps. In fact, a school was just recently named after my grandfather, and I've just been very fortunate the fact that that's happened. But something else was I ended up interning a part of the Emmett J. Conrad Leadership Program that is being run by Senator West, and I had an opportunity to intern for the Dallas Cowboys for a few summers during the training camp. And while I was there, I started to realize that the world was rapidly changing around me in ways that I didn't really realize or think about before. That there were kids that looked like me who were previously on the earth a day before, who are no longer on the earth that day. And that was something that really got to me and really made me want to change what I was doing in my life. And so after that, I really had the opportunity to intern with Senator West over at his state Senate office, started to get involved more in policy, realized that that was something I wanted to be able to do a little bit more of, and I've just been very fortunate to realize that voting rights and political participation impacts so many different areas of people's lives, and that was the thing that really got me into it, is the family connection, but also realizing that the policies that get passed at the state legislative level very much have a very real impact on how people go about their lives. And unfortunately, sometimes those very same policies have an impact on whether or not somebody's life can end as well. And it was through that realization that I realized that this is something I want to be able to do. I want to try to make people's lives a little bit better, try to change the systems that are around us. And I've just been very fortunate and blessed that I have had a support system that has given me the opportunity to do those very things. So whether it's family, whether it's friends, or whether it's wonderful mentors, I think it's very important for all of us to be able to give back to the community, so hopefully we can be their entry point in order to be able to move forward. And we also have to realize that as much as we can look back on the past and realize that our ancestors had to go through so much to get to where we are today, we also need to realize that we are someone else's ancestors. So it's very important for us to actively try to move forward and do the same.
That was deep.
Ooh. Don't age me. Okay. This question is one that is loaded for me, because in a lot of ways, my entry point, my life is a Rubik's Cube of some sort. I'm born and raised in South Dallas to parents. My dad is in urban pharmaceuticals, and my mom, she passed away when I was 19. She contracted AIDS, HIV, after giving birth to me by way of a blood transfusion. And so from the time I was born up until she passed, I just remember her being such a servant and a counselor, and she was traveling the world and she was fly. She was speaking all over the world about the AIDS epidemic. And at the time I didn't know it, but she was an organizer. And I remember getting dressed up, going to all these fancy fundraisers with all these people. And I also remember singing "We Are the World," releasing red balloons in the sky all the times because our neighbors were dying every other day. And so when I think about my entry, it's like, wow, would it be like just watching my mom? Or would it be at the age of 19 when I got arrested? And while I was arrested, I came in with so many different ideologies. And I was like, I'm innocent. And for a crime I didn't commit. And it was a violent offense. And I had an attorney, Larry Taylor. Thank God for him. The actual offender was a white woman from Garland, Texas, and I'm from South Dallas, so I don't know nothing about none of that. I think this context is critical as it relates to my entry, though, because while I was inside, I learned to organize in untraditional ways. It was, if you can give me an envelope, I will braid your hair for your court date tomorrow, girl. Like, we gonna look out for each other. You got a honey bun, I'll give you this. You can use a few minutes on my phone call. And it was a level of mutuality that was built there that I began to see. It was a level of community that, if I'm being real, had escaped me because I was in survival mode up until that moment. It slowed me down a bit. And also, I got to know Jesus Christ. I think that's important to name, and he grounded me, because before that I was just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit too much. And in that grounding, I remember hearing God through the word, and he said, you know, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me to proclaim freedom for the captives. And I remember reading that scripture over and over, and the good news for the poor. You know, it was just, I was reading these words and they was jumping off the page. And when I came home, I knew I was gonna do something, didn't know what I was gonna do. And I didn't meet this young man in the room, but his name is Sean Reed. We've been friends since I was in 3rd grade. And he was coming home from college and I was coming home from prison. And we were in a garage in my auntie's house, and he was like, yeah, what you gonna do next? And he was just so optimistic. And I remember we had this real crazy conversation. I said, yeah, I wanna talk to people, and I just was naming general things I like to do and I knew I could do well. And he said, well, let's do it. And I was like, he really believed in me. He really believed in me, and I believed in him too. I had probably up until then only did some work with Top, knocking doors and canvassing, and I was great at it. I was great at talking to people, and they would really get out and go vote. So I was like, yeah, but I really care about the issues. We were working on a ballot initiative around HB 20, I want to say it was. It was an immigration bill, and I remember like, yeah, that's more my. When I was electing people that I didn't even like, if I'm being in the band, because I ain't know too much, you know. And so I got in the groove of it, and I said, you know, the issues, that's more my speed. And he invited me to apply for this Barack Obama fellowship. And I was like, nah, this for your type of people, because, you know, he do a lot at that time in his life. And I'm like, that's your people. And I name these things because it's critical. You would think that ain't got nothing to do with you, and it got everything to do with you. And so I went there, and it was the first time I shared my story at the table. And I went from this is your people to they was making me the poster girl the whole dang on conference. Put her up to the front, share your story, and you know, and it was so powerful. And I remember like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. Maybe a month later, I quit my job in the medical field, and I knew I was gonna go all in on whatever organizing looked like. And I got on campaigns. I worked with this brother here with Faith in Texas. They taught me how to tell my story in a more compelling way. They taught me how to move the church. I learned how to organize in a more efficient way there. So I name all those different entryways because I really couldn't just think of one. I think it's important that if folks know that the everyday things are organizing, that they know that the big things are organizing, and that the in-between, that too, is organizing.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, that's powerful. I think mine is similar, right? Sometimes things are developing around you, and you kind of just bump into it, even if you're living life on purpose, but you may think that you're bumping into it. I'm a fourth generation PK, and so growing up in that line and tradition, I've seen what I thought success was, or what a organizer, activist, spokesperson should be, right? Even from being the small kid to get pushed into all the lines of, you're gonna do the Easter speech, or you're gonna do this, right? So sometimes people are developing things in you along the way that will be useful for you way down the line. And so I think that was kind of my inception into using some of the gifts I have now, but I think representation matters too. And when I got to college, I met a guy who was an organizer. He was our student advisor. He was a campus advisor to an organization off campus. I went to school down in East Texas, and the most popular black person and the person who dealt with everybody there in East Texas was a funeral director. And so he saw something in me just really kind of off the beaten path. You wouldn't think that, again, talk about we're all organizers, right? Even people who have professional roles in our community, we all have a role to play. And so that person saw something in me, talked to me about organizing, came back to Dallas, and I met somebody who looked like me again, right? That was the first black DA in the state of Texas who lived at the junction of democracy and liberation, and that's Craig Watkins. I had the opportunity to intern with Craig Watkins, went on to work for several other elected officials, but sometimes these things are developing in you along the way, and you'll use them at a later point. But I think representation matters. When we talked about who's electable, those things matter because there may be somebody that you run into along the way that can really spark something to come alive in you.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for sharing your stories. Just absolutely beautiful and so compelling. We're getting to the end of our conversation, and so I want to ask you guys if you have one bit of advice or closing remarks that you would leave with this audience and the next generation about what it means to own and build their power.
Yeah, there's a quote that I often refer to in order to be able to empower myself, and that is a quote from Frederick Douglass. It says, "Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did and it never will." And that is something I try to say to myself, again, whenever I get tired, wherever I feel that I don't have enough energy in me. I tell myself that because I realize that I have to keep on fighting for it. As the Negro National Anthem says, you have to march on until victory is won. So I just do my best to do my best, and I just keep on trying to put one foot in front of the other, keep on demanding to be heard, demanding that the people like me are heard, and to demand that we're able to actually have some changes. Because once again, as I said before, for something to change, something has to change. And so that is something that I definitely like to remember day after day.
Yeah, don't leave any power on the table. It's quite that simple for me and to me. Don't leave any on the table. So that's voting and. And I'm just probably gonna close the way I started, but this time I want y'all to join me. So if y'all can, repeat after me. It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to fight for freedom.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
To care for each other.
To care for each other.
And support each other.
And support each other.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
I say. Like, we're back on the front line. I'd add this in closing that, I heard someone say, don't ask, I guess the quote is attributed to Benjamin Elijah Mays, who said, don't ask the world what it needs, ask yourself what makes you come alive, and then do that. Mm-hmm. So for folks who want to get involved, don't know where to get involved, maybe a little apprehensive, say, I'm not an organizer, I'm not a leader, I'm not an activist. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. And then once you answer that question, do that. And I think that's when you'll find your space in the movement.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. If we could give a round. Oh, do we have a question?
Yes, do we have questions?
I'd love to take one.
I
Yes.
want to take questions. We got time.
To be honest, that is a very good question. I know recently we've seen some special elections across the country where there have been individuals who have been a part of the Democratic Party, and we have seen that swing from individuals who would have voted for the Trump administration and did vote for the Trump administration during 2024, who have realized that the administration has caused some very real issues and who have swung back the opposite direction. And so that is something that has happened, but I would also be remiss whenever I talk about voting to not talk about some of the current threats that we are all facing right now. For example, there are a few bills that are currently being discussed in Congress right now. That'd be the SAVE Act, the Save America Act, and the Make Elections Great Again Act, also known as MEGA. And those three bills are very regressive bills that actively try to strip away a lot of what we believe to be a part of our voting rights. So we're talking about mail-in ballots. We're talking about some states who do ranked choice voting. That is also being taken away by some of these bills. We're also talking about the ability for somebody to even be able to vote without having to prove that they are a citizen. Like, we're talking about somebody needing to be able to show their birth certificate or their passport at the polls in order to be able to vote. Those are the things that we're actively trying to see, and that is also something that would actively take a lot of people off the rolls. We oftentimes talk about people being kicked off the rolls. That is ultimately what that looks like. Mm-hmm. Those are the bills that are actively going to end up being able to do it. And also, we got to realize that our Texas state legislature is very active in doing those same efforts as well. So whenever it comes to people turning out to vote, there have been very real efforts to galvanize people that I know that are happening at the county party level and even at the state party level, and even nonpartisan actors who are actively trying to make sure that people understand what's on the ballot, understand the bills that are going to end up affecting them, and also just trying to make sure that they understand what their power is, because if we don't understand what our collective power is, it's very easily going to be taken away. So, Mr. Hill, I hope that ends up answering your question, but there has been a lot of effort in order to try to get people to turn out to vote, especially considering some of the negative ramifications that have happened after this current administration ended up getting elected in November 2024.
Add to that real quickly. In Dallas County, I think we have right now the opportunity for the perfect storm to see record-breaking turnout here specifically in North Texas, but specifically in Dallas County because of who's on the ballot, from the U.S. Senate race to the congressional race. You have some high-profile national folks who are organizers at their core. And I think that from the voter perspective, people say, give me somebody that I can believe in. Right? I think that the ticket has done that. And so now it's all of us, it's on all of us, or incumbent for all of us to really do our job now, do our work to make sure that people know that these folks are on the ballot and to get out and push and amplify. So I think that because of who's on the ballot this time, I think we could see a record turnout, specifically in Dallas County.
And also to your point, Mr. Hill, also understanding the data. I think we might get too high level at times, but understanding the data of who's actively turning out in certain precincts, I think that's also something that's incredibly important too, because if one neighborhood has a 70% voter turnout rate and the neighborhood right next to it only has a 35, that is information that's incredibly important to know, because if we're able to turn that 35 into 50, we got to pick up on the margins in order for our community to actively be able to be heard and to be seen. So it's not this one giant effort that we need to be able to do. It's trying to win at the very localized level in your neighborhood, in your community, in your church, in order to be able to figure out, are you registered, are you not? Like, what do you need in order to become an active voter? What information can I give you in order for you to feel empowered, in order to be able to not just help yourself, but to help your community?
Any other questions? We got a little time.
And there's a storm brewing here somewhere. You know, if we start picking up wins in Tarrant County, in places that we traditionally haven't, and winning by large margins, I think that's signs of things to come in this election cycle.
Absolutely.
And it's also just important not to get complacent.
Yeah.
We have to keep on fighting every single day. We have to keep on fighting for that one vote, trying to make sure that we're able to do everything we possibly can in order to be able to get it. There's a movie that I really love. It's called Any Given Sunday. And I know it's a sports movie, but as somebody who interned for the Cowboys, that movie meant a lot to me. But there's a speech that Al Pacino ends up giving, and it's about fighting for that inch. But instead of fighting for that inch, we have to fight for that vote, because that one vote can end up changing an election. And I think that is something that is the same energy, the same veracity that we have to move forward with, to fight for that individual vote, because if we could change that one vote, there's nothing that we can't do.
Absolutely.
I like that.
Yes, ma'am. I believe there is another question, if we don't mind.
Do I see? Okay.
Really get excited about voting?
I think I heard her question. Would
The
you mind-
18 to
Yes,
40-year-olds.
Yes.
Are we starting to see the young voters really getting excited about voting? And if we aren't, what can we do to help? You know, my daughter always says, you guys are old, you know, us baby boomers, you know, we just kind of hanging around, you know. But what can we do to help encourage them, to help excite them, so that we can really get them, you know, to the polls?
Well, to be honest with you, I think that's a little bit of a complicated question. And the reason why I say it's a complicated question is because it also goes to accountability. Accountability with ourselves, that we are going to be able to make space for those kids to actively be involved in our political processes. If we say, hey, it's not your turn, or hey, we don't need you right now, that is a very good way in order to actively stop somebody from wanting to be able to show up. So it's about giving them a leeway to be able to say, like, hey, what is something that's important to you? How can you actively get involved? How can you be an organizer or an activist? I think that is something that we can all do in order to be able to make way for people to come behind us, in order to be able to have more of a role, more of a say. And even if it means letter writing, even if it means making calls, giving people an opportunity to be able to be active, I would say that's one. The second thing I would say is finding out what's important to them. I said this a little bit earlier, but politics plays a very important role on TikTok. In fact, there are certain words that you can't even say on TikTok anymore since this current administration ended up taking over. Whenever it comes to our social media such as Facebook, whenever it comes to Twitter, whenever it comes to even our search engines such as Google, those are the things that we need to be able to think about, because oftentimes those very same CEOs you might find them cozying up to people who are able to control a lot of other things. And I'm not casting aspersions one way or another. I say this all as Louis Arthur Bedford IV, not as a part of any organization or entity I may be affiliated with. But it is very important to be able to empower people, not just tell people the things that they should care about. Because telling somebody rather than empowering somebody, that's a very clear line. And that line also makes a very real difference in whether or not somebody is going to turn out to vote or whether or not somebody might just say something to placate you in order to make you feel a little bit better about what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I'll just add, like, our young voters, they are smart. They smart. They don't just go for no anything. And so we got to present our young voting base with elected officials who stand on business, for one, and then two, that represent their values, that reflect their values. What are their values, right? I mean, there's a lot of issues that's happening throughout the world that our younger generation care about. It's not just America. So, one, we need a slate that reflects and represents what our young folks, who are the architects of the future, what they care about. Two, I think some of the tools that we utilize to get voters out are outdated. I'm just sorry to tell you. But souls to polls don't reach young folks. So we need some other tools. I ain't saying get rid of the things we have, but we need brunching. We need to be in other places.
Sunday
Meet
fun
people
day.
where
We
they
need
are.
to be meeting the young people and
they
people
are.
in general where they are. Maybe we need Casanat, if that's where the streaming is happening, Jeremy. I don't know. But we need to be in other places, and that comes back to freedom dreaming, and that comes back to being innovative. And we need innovation. We need young folks to be a part of these critical conversations. Like anytime I'm even at a panel, usually I'm like, where's the young person? Because that's who I need to be hearing from, if I'm being honest. What are your thoughts on this? And so I'm very particular about young people. We're not speaking for them. We can't speak for them. We must hear from them, and we must give them space to lead. We must nurture our young folks, and that's all connected and goes back to voting. If you want to know why they aren't voting, ask them.
Yeah.
Ask them, and trust me, they vocal.
Yeah. Also, that phone makes the world a lot smaller, too. A lot of things are a little bit closer and easier to access whenever you're on your phone. So that's also something I think is very important, too.
Conspiracies.
At this last speech, maybe about 3 months ago, a candidate running statewide had an event in Deep Ellum, a rally, and there were nearly 3,000 people. Most of them I've never seen before, and I interact and organize day to day, right? So these were first-time people who've coming to hear a candidate on a weeknight in Deep Ellum. One, why is that important? One, you had it in Deep Ellum, right? Places where that's walkable, folks are already out there hanging out, partying, places that's familiar. But then you had a candidate with a message that was speaking specifically to young people, 3,000 people. They had to turn people away on a weeknight. And so I think that's some of the energy that I think we'll see this primary election. And it doesn't always look like organizing in traditional spaces. Sometimes that phone makes the world a lot smaller.
And you can't be scared of the young folks. You can't be scared of the YNs. You can't be scared. Talk to them.
We have a couple more questions over here.
Oh,
So the people can hear you online.
I wanted to hear your thoughts because we talk about young voters, which I totally agree with. But, we go to political things where information is being shared often, probably 2 or 3 times a month. And this crowd reflects what we see. Those people who are engaged, those people who understand the importance, those people who come to support because we understand the importance. But we're housed in the middle of this neighborhood. There's houses and people all around us. And we've got to figure out how to get those people, because it's not just the young folks, it is people who are disengaged for whatever reason. And the reason is not important, we need them, desperately need them. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, like even for an event tonight, how do you think we could have been slightly more impactful? And I'm not saying this wasn't, because there's total people that are seeing it and it's online and this is a great thing, but what are your thoughts about ensuring that whenever we put forth this effort and energy, we are impactful in the people that we reach?
I would love to speak a little bit on this. So, two things for certain, right? Because to give you a little bit of context about me, I recently became a precinct chair. So for anybody who doesn't know what a precinct chair is, because I didn't before I became one, you're basically in charge of mobilizing your neighborhood, right? And so I started going to precinct chair meetings, and precinct chair meetings are full of people who've been doing this a long time, so it's an older crowd, and God willing, hopefully I'll live to get old, so I'm not mad at the elderly. But it's an older crowd. And so as I think about how to engage the youth, a couple of things come to mind. So my training is in higher ed, so I worked on college campuses for the majority of my career. And so in my small business, I started a collegiate ambassador program. So I was like, this is like my little mini sorority that I have going on with my girls. And when I was forcing them to come to our political events, they were like, this is old. It's just giving old and we're not feeling it, But I took that feedback and I was like, okay, what do y'all want to do then? If y'all don't want to come listen to the people talk, what do you actually want to do? And so they started researching their own issues and putting together social media campaigns because they wanted to be posted on a page. That was the holy grail to them, is to be posted on Instagram. And so I let them come up with their own, research these 5 issues, make a 2-minute video about it, post the video. Sometimes those end up getting a lot of reach, a lot of views, and we're able to reach the people on their campus in a way where even if we held this same event, it's really difficult to get them in the room because just at face value, they don't seem interested. Versus if we can break some of this down into different nuggets and share it in the same way that it's gonna be shared tonight, where a lot of this great information that's been shared is gonna be shared online and it's memorialized in that way, in 3 months, a kid could run across this and then still have all of this same information. So I think so much of it is kind of meeting people where they are, and right now they right here with the phone in their face. And so I wish it was another way and that we were more connected in a face-to-face, but I think right now we have to focus on that. I think the second thing that the trend that I see online, because a lot of my work is online, the second thing that we see is that people are starting to come together in niche communities. So you're starting to see people get together and they do want to do we're having a book club, a knitting club, a this or that, in these kind of niche spaces. And so I think the more that we kind of slide information into there, the better off we're going to be. I started hosting dinners called Influence for Impact, and they're cute and they're nice and everybody gets dressed up, and then I get there and I'm kind of like, so the state of the world, and that's what we discuss. Now I kind of had to trick you a little bit to get you there. I had to. I didn't have a choice, because if I had said we're going to be talking about the political and economic state of the world, you wouldn't have came. But once we get there and we're able to share a meal, we're able to have good food, good conversation, you can hear from an elected official or somebody that's organizing, now you're interested, now you're intrigued, now you're leaving all inspired. Now you want to go talk to the millions of people that follow you about, okay guys, maybe we should vote. Yes, I hate I had to do all that to get you there, but it is what it is, So those are just some of the ways that I'm, in the small work that I do, that I'm just trying to be creative about understanding where people's mindset is at and just meeting them right there. Because I think you're exactly right. When I look around the neighborhood, I used to be like this at church. I would be like, how we some missionary Baptists? We ain't doing no missions. Where's the people? They still outside. So I think it's just about meeting people where they are and doing that in a really tangible way.
And I'll just add that numbers isn't the only metric of success nor impact. I named that because Jesus only needed 12. And if I wouldn't have cared if it was 12 or 10,000 in this room or any other, but I know that the people that need to be here are the people that are here. And the mandate for you all is to take this back to your communities. So in a lot of ways, the communities are in this room, the nations are in this room, because you are connected to those places and to those spaces. So I push that back on you to then go tell your people what you heard on tonight. Share the information that you're retaining at a lot of these meeting spaces and find ways to spread it. We don't need 100 people. To be honest with you, that would be great. But I think impact is found in leaders. It's found in leadership. It's found in folks who can spread it, right? Not just merely attendees. And so I just wanted to kind of add that to the mix.
My final question is, you were talking about the young people. How can the party use what has happened with ICE and immigration and the protests that you're seeing in the high schools to get those people more involved, where you are actually, if the governor says you can't do it Monday through Friday because you're going through school time, what are you doing to go after school to make sure they are aware of what they can do from a political point of view?
One, meeting them where they are, right? Some of these things, and I guess it's good and inspiring because it's happening around us, right? It's not even being party-led or senior organizer-led. Someone just told me that one of my younger cousins, she's in high school, can't even vote, that she's doing a Souls to the Polls rally at Carter High School and going to march people across the street to Friendship West. So you see students rallying. I met an organizer from the Townview walk out just this morning, right? So when these students become activated on their own, how do we harness that energy and say, hey, here's another avenue that you can plug into, right? Here's something bigger than just your own organizing group. Now, that's not saying that we should co-opt their organizing groups, because they have shown that they can effectively organize themselves. But when we start to see this kind of trickling effect, I think we have good momentum. And so that's just touching base with those folks, connecting them, saying, hey, we're here. The party apparatus is here for you. The community is here for you. And so letting them know that they have a place that they can plug into and that we can show up for you and support your effort too. I plan to join the young sister who's 17 years old at her rally to let her know that the community supports you as well. So I think once we start to connect with each other and let them know that they have some backup and reinforcement, I think that's when we build that momentum.
Same. I met some of the organizers also, and we all see this wave. It's catching fire, right? But it needs to be harnessed. It needs that, additional education and support. Let them know, like, what y'all need. Y'all need some additional, strategy, infrastructure, and also just, safety plans. Oftentimes a lot of protests and things, they're based off of rage and reaction, but is there a safety protocol? Do y'all need some additional training? And how can we actually be a little more impactful? Visibility is great, rage and protest, all of that is great, but what is the outcome that we want to see? And it's just being able to organize them in a way, right now they're very mobilized and structured in that way, but how can we organize it in such a way where your voices are heard?
I want to say one thing, though. I think protesting and getting involved in activism and organizing, that is also a way for us to be able to humanize ourselves. Yeah. Whenever you use the word illegal, whenever you otherize something, it is very easy to dehumanize it. It's very easy to say that it has no value. And so whenever you do that, it's very easy to justify why terrible things can happen to that group if you otherize it, if you demonize it, so to speak. And I think a way to humanize a lot of this is to be able to be out in the street and say, no, this person is a human being, so am I. Because if this can happen to this other person, if we can allow for murders to happen in the street in front of our very eyes and say, oh, what we just saw isn't real, that not only doesn't just dehumanize them, it dehumanizes who we are. If we are able to allow that to happen to somebody else, what does it say about us? And so I think that's also something very important. Whenever it talks about these kids, it's a way for them to try to humanize themselves with so much going on. And I think to the party apparatus and to whatever nonprofit and nonpartisan organizing effort that there is, it's just to be able to rally behind these kids and say, we hear you, we see you, we want to make sure that you feel empowered doing the thing that you're doing. Just give them some leeway of sorts in order for them to humanize themselves.
Thank you all so much for tonight. Thank you for, yep, that's it.
okay.
Yes.
Fair time.
We've made it to the end, but I think we'll be around for a little minute. So we're not running out the door. If you have any kind of,
Friday also.
what'd you say?
I'll be here on Friday evening from 6 to 7:30. So Freedom Friday in Defense of Black Lives, along with many local organizers, Romero with Somos Tejas, Hannah Kessler with the Young Voter Project. We're gonna be here all week. Thank you, NJN, for all that you all are doing for this week of action.
Also, remember, tomorrow's the first day of early voting.
Yes,
Look at
absolutely.
Election Day as the last day to vote, not Election Day. It is the last day to vote. Also, make sure you get your mail-in ballot in early, because the reality is with the mail system that we currently have, the earlier the better. And so if you haven't made a plan to vote, make a plan to vote. If you don't know who you're gonna vote for, you can figure it out whenever you're there. Just make sure you have a plan, make sure you show up, and make sure you vote and I think everything else will be okay.
Yes. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists, and thank you to all of you for being here.
You good?
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, is it still live?